Man has a lot of desires and he is attached to worldly objects, and it's God only that could bring about a change in man's life. He can bring about purity in his or her life, and in order to attain such kind of purity, man needs to do a strong penance, because there are lifetimes of desires and attachment in his subtle body, which is also the life of a monk that sold his factories. Hello friends, welcome to my channel, All Things Spiritual. Today we will look at the story of a monk who sold off his factories and not his Ferraris. Also, this story isn't related to the book by Robin Sharma, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. For all who don't know who Robin Sharma is and what his book is about, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, here's a small gist to it. The book tells an extraordinary story of Julian Mantle, a lawyer forced to confront the spiritual crisis of his out-of-balance life and the subsequent wisdom that he gains on a life-changing odyssey that enables him to create a life of passion, purpose and peace. Our story is also kind of on a similar line, but it has lot more aspects to be taken from The Monk Who Sold His Factories, for it is a true story and the monk was able to transform himself in a matter of just 4 years. People struggle for a lifetime to attain peace in their lives, but God, who knows the Jiva, is all-knowing and all-pervading and also knows when to turn the Jiva's life around. The turn itself is a miracle in his life. Until then, he is asleep and he is not awake, and he is just continuing his dream state in his waking life and has various errors in his behavior. The story that I am going to tell you would get you goosebumps so as to how God takes care of his own. It doesn't mean he doesn't take care of others. Man just doesn't notice it. Once faith is totally placed on the all-pervading, the lives of the person totally change, and it's a vast difference from a detrimental life that the person might have been living. Such a businessman was living a life full of flowing cash and living a lavish lifestyle. He had a business of selling leather handbags. The businessman had a very successful business. Due to the successful business, he was on a roll and money was pouring in from his business. The reason mainly was that he carried positive rays and he was a sattvic man. His business was at such a level that his returns were multifold as compared to similar businesses of similar nature. His sales were very fierce and the sales were happening automatically on their own. His life went on and the money was flowing until one fine morning the businessman told his wife that he was tired of all the money that he's been seeing, and by seeing all those notes he felt disgusted. A point to note here is that people get thousands of dollars of contracts and they would still be craving for more, but the businessman was such that his life was different. It was not a normal man's life, and God's arrangement was such that his wife, even though very fond of riches and wealth, was very understanding of her husband, and that just stood out in her life even though she was far more materialistic. God makes such arrangements. So when her husband asked her that he was going to sell off the factories and he was going to leave the worldly life, and there is not much he was going to get by living in the worldly life, and he would be proceeding to an onward journey on his own, he said that as long as I stay here, I am going to be immersed into a worldly life which I am now averse to. I have to leave. I need to move toward a spiritual life, and if I feel that if I stay on, I am going to be taking care of my grandkids in the future, and such kind of a life would be very binding and a worldly life which I am not going to be interested in. Since his wife was so understanding, she said, what you feel is good, please go ahead and do so. So her husband told her that by leaving you, I am not going to leave you penniless. I would hand over all the properties and cars that we have over to you and our children, and I am the one who's going to walk away penniless. As to how I would be surviving, that God would only decide. So he didn't even keep a single penny in his pocket before leaving. What a brave man. He had such a thirst to meet his own maker that he signed off all his property over. His daughters were also sad to see him go, but they were old enough and the prospect of money got them comfort that they would not need to work a single day in their lives. His wife told him that as we were going to continue our worldly life, then having money is lot more comfortable for us to live our lives. He then said to his wife, I am making sure that you have a comfortable life and you can enjoy the homes and cars and the money for the rest of your lives. He didn't keep a single penny in his pocket, let alone a mobile or some kind of train ticket communicate. All was just left to God, thinking that God would take care of everything. This is the call of the Atma. Once the Atma calls, it just has to be fulfilled. You or me are nothing in front of the enormous force of nature. You may be making millions or may be deeply busy in your family life, but when the call of the Atma comes from inside, the Jiva has no other options. He just can't even say yes or no. It's just done. Karmas mean nothing at this point. They just happen. Life just happens, and this is the spontaneity that everyone in the world is actually looking for. Due to the crowding of the unwanted thoughts in each of our minds, we are unable to understand the calls of our Atma. It needs some kind of steady sattvic mind to understand this. So the man set out on his journey, and imagine there was nothing to eat at times, and so he picked up banana peels that were laying on his way and ate those. Needless to say, he had become a recluse. He kept on roaming and roaming. He had no money and he wasn't asking anyone for anything, not even directions as to where he had to go. Until someone gave him something to eat, he used to stay hungry, and sometimes someone used to give him clothes. And this was the arrangement by God. The businessman used to not even think of his clothes that were torn and that he needs some new clothes. An affluent person with factories was not concerned that his clothes were torn. Just imagine that. The reason was that he was trying to forget who he was in the past. So, roaming and roaming, he reached Punjab, which is north of India, and in Punjab, he was getting restless as it was a year already that had passed that he had left his home. So, in Punjab, he met a holy man, and the man told him to go to the Himalayas. There was a guru waiting for him. The businessman replied to him, "The Himalayas are a huge place. Where would I start the search from?" And the holy man replied, "Don't worry about it. Just have faith, and the answers will unfurl on their own. Don't tell me the Himalayas are a huge place. How could it be possible that I would have met you in the first place?" He went to the Himalayas, and then his Atma took him close to a cave. His Atma told him that this is your guru's home, and he went into the cave and saw no one. He waited there for a day. He didn't get scared of the wild animals that were around while he was sitting in the cave. That was his confidence due to his total reliance on his Atma or soul. Imagine for a moment a man with so many factories a year ago. What a drastic change in his life. So after waiting for a day, he started talking to his Atma, and he said, "My dear Guru, I know you are here. I have full confidence in you. And the only thing is that my materialistic eyes are unable to see your form. I am sorry for that. Please forgive me, and I am unable to see you, but it would make me feel a lot better if I was able to see you." And so, just by saying this, the Guru appeared before him. He was always there, just that he wasn't able to see him. And when the Guru appeared, it felt like the sun had just shown up, such a brightness in the darkness of the cave. He prostrated to his feet and asked the Guru to redeem him. The Guru said, "I am not here to redeem you, and I am ready to go." The businessman told the Guru that he was not going to leave his feet no matter what. The Guru asked the businessman, "Do you consider me to be your Guru? Then here is what you should do. Next to this cave is another cave where there is a flowing waterfall. All you need to do is just see the waterfall for the next 4 years. When there appears light in the waterfall, you will get some milk during the day, but you are not supposed to meditate or chant. The reason for you not to chant is that you are a highly impure person right now. The years and years of living a worldly life has deposited a lot of filth in your mind, and this needs to be cleaned. For this, you will have to sit patiently and just watch the free-flowing water day and night." So for the 4 years, he was completely isolated. He didn't even come out of the cave for even half a minute. He didn't chant a single chant as per the Guru's wishes, and they were a command to him. And in the 4 years, all his desires and passion were all dissolved. The mind was absolved of the worldly topics, and such worldly topics are not that easy for a human to easily disassociate. As for his past, he was very impatient when he ran his business prior to these 4 years. But just by simply watching the waterfall, his mind was then automatically centered. After the 4 years, the Guru returned back to him in the cave, and he asked him to come to see him in his cave. And his Guru then sat him on a pedestal, and he honored and worshipped him. The Guru then mentioned to him that he was now absolutely pure in a godly sense. Your pride, desire, unclean nature, and worldly appetites have now been dissolved. The businessman had now turned into a monk, and he was so egoless that he didn't even stop the Guru from worshipping him. Generally, our egos are such that we may not allow allow anyone to worship us, or we may have pride that someone is worshipping us. The businessman turned monk now had dissolved the barrier between him and his guru, and so he allowed the guru to worship him. This is what is called Shirdi, or real purity. And then his guru told him that now you have to roam the whole country of India again, and you need not beg for food. God will make arrangements for you. You should not ask anyone for anything. Without mistake, don't ask for alms. Your meals will be set up, and that's the respect that you earned. Don't keep in your mind if anyone is going to serve you or not. The guru then gave the monk a mantra to recite. The guru told him that now you are ready for chants. If you had done it before, you would have got a pride or an ego out of the chant, but now since you are pure, you won't incur any wrongs by doing your chants. This mantra is very pure, and the guru gave him the mantra. He started chanting the mantra, and he prostrated to his guru, and he got out of the cave and started on his journey. The next 3 years went in just roaming, and he would go wherever he felt like he wanted to go. There were times when he didn't get any food, but the mantra had such a power in it that the monk, by chanting it, would feel full, and he was not caring as to where he slept or where he went. God was totally running his show, and he was totally relying on his guru and internally on his own Atma. After 3 years, one afternoon, he was hungry and he saw a banana peel on the road, and he felt to satisfy his hunger when suddenly a car came to a screeching halt right in front of him, and due to God having his back all the time, he wasn't thrown off, and the car came to a halt right in front of him. It stopped just an inch of him, even though it came at such a momentum. The driver of the car got down and cursed him. He started to say that you sannyasis are beggars, and you never see a dime, neither do you see a car coming your way. This was being said to the person who had a line of cars at his own residence. But gone were those days though. The driver was himself another businessman. He was cursing the monk, and by cursing the monk, he was incurring sins. The monk said nothing in return. The businessman got back into his car and went his own way, furious that he had to stop unnecessarily. In 5 minutes though, he had to turn back because he got so restless due to his cursing, and his mind had gone bust. The body was blown on its inner side, and he kind of knew the reason for that. Because a bright and powerful force was in the presence of the monk, and it is present in the midst of all yogis, and this force just tightened the noose on the businessman's neck. It was like having a heart attack. He was so scared of what had just happened, and all his aggravation had dropped, and he got back to the monk and fell to his feet. He then asked him, "Sir, who are you?" The monk replied to him, "Who am I? That search is going on." He didn't tell him who he was. Generally, a person has real interest to talk about himself, and as I discussed in my previous video, people are just interested to talk about who they are and what they do in the world, but they don't really know who they really want to be. Please check out my last video. The businessman told the monk that you are so bright and I cursed you. I didn't realize you are an attained being. Now I can see that, and please forgive me. The businessman hadn't seen anyone so bright in his entire life. This is due to the monk's subtle body that expanded through the 7 years of penance. The eyes were specifically very powerful. The businessman, on the other hand, was very shallow, and he was a sinner. He was the previous mirror image of the businessman who had turned monk. The businessman told the monk, "I cursed you so much, and you didn't even get angry." The monk told him that I have forgotten what anger feels like now. I have processed all my disorders and my worldly behaviors. I don't get angry anymore. The businessman asked him, "Could you come to my home please? I wasn't able to suitably apologize to you." The monk didn't disagree with him and left with him. After reaching his home, the businessman's family worshipped the monk, and the monk didn't disagree to this either. After worshipping the monk, the businessman told him that he felt like he had committed an offense against the monk, and if he could tell him what he could do for him. The monk asked him, "What could you do for me really? God is doing everything for me." And the businessman told him, "Yes, I agree to that. But you have to tell me, please, what I could do for you. The businessman then asked him if he could come to the Himalayas to meet him later. The monk said, sure, why not? If that is God's plan, it should work out. And the monk then went to the Himalayas to meet his guru. The monk, upon meeting his guru, the guru told the monk that he now had become a true yogi after 3 years of roaming since they had last met. He told him that his time was now over and then he had to take his guru's seat, and now he was the king. The businessman and his friend also came by to the monk and met with him. They told him that they have done a lot of wrongs and worthless things in their lives and they wanted some freedom from those karmas that they had done. The businessman said that my wish is that I should do something for you, and the monk's guru had told him before he left that the reins were in his hands and he could do whatever he could, as now whatever he did was God's wish. The businessman then handed over hundreds of acres of land in the name of the monk. The monk then started an ashram in the hundreds of acres, and the rules were that there would be no money transacted in the place. Anyone who wanted to come was free to stay at the ashram. The people that entered the ashram wouldn't be seeing the monk as a guru. There won't be any miracles happening at the ashram. The mind of the businessman was changed by the monk so much that he handed over hundreds of acres of land in the monk's name. The monk also accepted, as these are all God's plans only. The ashram then became grounds to spiritual paths of several spiritual people. There was no arrangement for food in the ashram and no one was worried about such stuff. Everyone in the ashram was involved in their own progress via meditative efforts. The monk didn't say anything because he wasn't interested in talking much after his 7-year penance. His wife then once came to visit him and he had changed so much that he really wasn't moved by meeting them after such a long time. He looked at them in the same way he looked at others. He had no feelings that they were his wife or his daughters. His daughters were married off and he didn't even visit his daughter's marriage, as he had left by telling his wife to not come in search of him, and the only way the wife came to know was due to the 100 acres of land by the way which she was finally able to track the monk. Such a monk, who was a businessman at the start of his life, became a great yogi after 7 years of penance. He wasn't even involved in his disciples' progresses. He had no desires that his disciples should progress or not. Even then, several disciples progressed and also several didn't. J. Krishnamurti, on the other hand, had a great disappointment that none of his students could approach greatness. Not even one of his students reached attainment. It wasn't that J. Krishnamurti was wrong. It was just that the mind of a man is not easily quelled and it takes a lot of patience and penance in the spiritual path. The reason is that to drop the I or the aham of the person is simply impossible. Even saints and recluses have an I in them. The 4 years of just watching the waters is a record time for someone to be desireless. What a struggle was it to get God for the monk, and we just have our meals and we assume that God will come to us. The plan for us to get God, if it is set, would definitely happen, and the Atma is the way to show this. Once the plan is set, we have to be firm in walking the path. Each and every one of us has our own abilities and our own boundaries. The one that really knows his abilities knows how far behind he or she is spiritually, and the ones that chant for a few minutes think that they already crossed the skies of their mind. They confirm next that they are on the path of moksha. Because just chanting a little bit, the I also then grows on the individual. The individual feels that he has just become a big yogi next to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa or Ramana Maharshi. The knots of the aham or the individual are very difficult to untie. Had the businessman not left his house, he wouldn't have turned into a monk. He didn't even know who he was going to be. He just got thirsty for God, and that in itself was a plan of God. He did a penance that lasted 7 years that some people won't even complete in 50 years. There was nothing to eat, just a pot of milk for the whole day for years together. Just day in day out watching the waters and no chanting, and through chanting the person actually starts to feel happy. Chant is a very important path to spiritual life, and not having to do that and to progress without it was absolutely tough for the monk. All the disorders, desires desires dissolved by watching the flowing waters in just 4 years. At the start of his penance, there was a lot of backlash from his mind, but slowly at the end of the 3.5 years in the cave, he was able to let loose of his desires. In order to let loose of your desires, you need to do a tough penance, as the desires and disorders of the jiva are not of one lifetime but several lifetimes. How did you like the story of the monk who sold his factories? I hope you can get an idea how to achieve purity and greatness and how tough it is to attain the path of enlightenment. Please let me know in the comment section below what do you think about this, and I will see you in the next video.